All right, it's Peter Cole, and I'm finally back. I took a bit of a break there. I apologize for that, but I'm back with a new video in my series of how to write for percussion. And again, we're mostly focused on kind of an intro to orchestral sample libraries in general, and this is kind of a subset of that series, and this is focused specifically on percussion. And rhythm in general, right? So they kind of go together often, right? So in the last video, we talked about the family of percussion instruments, and we talked about the different frequency ranges that each member of the family takes up, right? Like the low bass and then the high cymbals, and we talked about concepts of how to be aware of that frequency spectrum when you're starting to write for percussion. So I wanted to move on and start jumping into like layering percussion, talking about controlling tempo and more advanced quantizing techniques, which we're going to get to. But I realized I really need to step back a little bit and just do some bare bones, basic concepts around understanding rhythm, understanding how to write rhythm, literally like write it and how it looks in the score, and be able to read it. And most importantly, I think, is being able to count rhythm. I started as a drummer myself, and I was kind of forced into the world of having to count rhythm before I could even read the actual tonal notes, which I think really helped me because I was kind of forced to really become good at counting and reading rhythmic music. So we're gonna do some really kind of basic stuff in this video. If you've been studying music for a while, this is probably gonna be too basic for you, or maybe it'll be a good review. But you know, a lot of people that get into digital music production don't actually take the time or haven't been exposed to reading music and learning kind of the basic stuff. So it might be helpful to you if you're in that camp as well. And again, it's setting us up for getting a good, strong foundation for moving forward with more advanced topics. All right, so now I'm inside of Logic, and obviously you can use any software that you want. It's not specific to Logic. I will point out that I'm going to highlight a minute or two up here on just this main control panel because the concepts that we're going to be discussing relate very coincidentally to what's written here in the main interface. Hopefully you can see this. We have our bars, we have a beat, we have our tempo, and we have our time signature, also called the meter, which we're going to talk about. And then we have our key signature, which for this discussion isn't really relevant because we're mostly just talking purely about rhythm. So we're not really worried about what key it's in, but that's also there. And you know, when I start a new piece of music, when I'm composing something new or I'm working on a new project, heck, the first thing I do is I go in here and I look at what my tempo is set to. I think probably a lot of us do that, right? We start with the tempo. So what is the tempo again? Obviously, probably the most easiest concept to understand. It is the speed, really, of how fast the music is going. So if you have something that's set to 120, what does that mean? That means 120 beats per minute because tempo is measured in beats per minute. So that means every minute we are hitting, or we are completing, I should say, 120 beats in that minute. So if you were to raise that and say, let's make it, 180 beats per minute, well, now you're fitting in more beats in the same amount of time. So it's going to sound like it's going faster because you got to fit more in the same space. And conversely, of course, we go in the opposite direction. We go all the way down to, I don't know, 40 beats per minute. Now that's going to be pretty darn slow because now you've got an entire minute and you only got to get through 40 beats at once. So that's why tempo is probably the easiest thing to understand. And you're probably thinking, why am I even wasting my time on that? Well, again, let's just get a good foundation here and make sure we're all on the same page. That's where we're talking about beats per minute. And segues in to the other important concept, what the heck is a beat? In Logic here, they literally have a little interface here for the beat. And right now we're on beat 1. And watch what happens when I press play. See, it cycles through. Beat 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so on. So it's literally keeping track of those beats. So the beat is not to be confused with a drummer's beat or making beats. You know, it's not about the actual sound we hear. The beat in this context is the is a measurement of time. It's literally just, it's like a clock. I mean, really, the beat in this context is like the clock. It's a measurement of time. Certainly in the digital music production world, we have this concept of the click. Click is literally a audible representation of the beat, and it's a steady pulse, never changes. And again, the beat really has nothing to do with the sound. We play, we listen, the beat is used almost as a guide that we play on top of. But the beat is not really heard. It's more like it's felt. So if you wonder what a beat is, it's what you snap your fingers to or tap your toes to. It's when you're listening to music, you're hearing that beat and you're kind of pulsing along with it, right? But it's not actually the sound itself. Interesting, right? I always like to bring that up because we want to make sure we're not talking about drums when we say beat. And then bar here, and this is when we're going to start to dive into more traditional concepts here. A bar is like a kind of like a container of notes. And we have a certain number of notes that we put in the bar, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But it's like a way of kind of segmenting out the music. So if we look here right now, I've basically just got one bar. Watch this number here, right up here at the top of the screen. It's always staying on one. The beat's changing, but the bar doesn't change because I've only composed one bar so far. So we only have one bar we're working with. Obviously, a piece of music could have many, many bars and go on and on and on. But this piece of music that I have here, we could even call it that, is just one bar. And if you look down here at the score, the bars are separated by these vertical lines here. So if I were to double my bar, watch me do this. So now, see, right now we're going to move to bar 2. I'm just going to paste the same exciting music in there. Now, of course, we have 2 bars because we have these 4 notes, and then we have this vertical line, and then another 4 notes, and then another vertical line. Pretty self-explanatory, right? I know it's basic, but let's just get on the same page. Now, this brings us to the time signature or meter, and that's what we have up here. Currently set to 4/4. So what does that mean? When we say something is 4/4, we're saying the first number there is how many beats are going to fit in the bar. So currently we're saying there's going to be 4 beats in the bar. And then we're saying, well, what are the value of those beats? And because this is set to 4, we are saying that those are going to be what's called a quarter note. So I'll bring up the screen. I think this will be a lot easier to understand. And I didn't create this. I stole this off the internet. I'm sorry to thankful for whoever created this. It's super helpful. But this is what this is exactly about, right? So if we're saying that a beat is going to be equal to a quarter note because we're assigning it that value of 4, right? 4/4. And we look down here in the chart. Well, here is our 1 beat. And those are our quarter notes. So we're basically saying the quarter notes are going to be the hit of the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. If I split that in half and said, well, actually, I just want to play 2 notes during this bar, well, then, of course, I would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So notice how I'm only clapping on 1 and 3 because we're using half notes there. And then, of course, if we were using a whole note, this top one, the toppest, I literally just made that word up, the toppest. The highest of the food chain here, this is just one single note. 1, 2, 3, 4. So a whole note takes up 4 beats in this case, right? That's what it says here, 4 beats. Half note takes up 2. Quarter takes up 1, and then here we go with our fancy eighth notes. That's breaking it up even more, and these take up a half a beat. So that's 1 and 2 and 3. We'll get more into it, but you get the general idea, right? So that's how 4/4 comes established. What happens if we change it to another common one, good old 3/4? What does that mean? Well, that means we have 3 notes per bar. Sorry, not 3 notes, 3 beats. Big difference. 3 beats per bar. And we're still, because it's a 4, it's still quarter notes. So here we have 3 quarter notes per bar. 1, 2, 3, new bar. 1, 2, 3, new bar. And this would keep going if I kept writing it. So that's what makes the 3/4 time signature. 4/4, I think you probably already know this, is by far the most common. It's definitely the most common in popular music. Not that it's the only time signature, but it is certainly what we hear the most of, without a doubt. Now, 3/4 is not super rare either. It's definitely used in waltz music. Let's just give this a listen. Now here you can hardly tell the difference because there's no emphasis really on any other note. So it almost sounds exactly the same as 4/4 would. But usually what we're talking about when we're talking about a difference in time signature is an emphasis on the beat. So for example, in 4/4, we'll often emphasize like the 1 and the 3. So it'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if we tried a similar thing in 3/4, it would be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Also, taking that a bit further, if we emphasize the 1 and the 3 in 3/4, listen to how that sounds. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Now we got something that sounds dramatically different, right? So let's go back to our 4/4. Excuse me. 4/4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You notice how none of the emphasized beats ever are next to each other. There's always a gap. There's always a space between them because it's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. So it's very steady. 4/4 is like it is the steady beat. That's why it's used so much. But in 3/4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now we have the 3 and the 1 being emphasized back to back. 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Hopefully you can hear that. And it's the sound of waltz music. So if you've been to a wedding recently or listened to a lot of big band or waltz music, that's what 3/4 is. It's that bum, 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 bum. Very different sound than 4/4. Now we can spend obviously a whole video on time signatures, and we got to move on or we'll be here all night. But that's what the time signature is for. So we have now, I'm going to switch this back to 4/4. And that's effectively the concepts of, or that's effectively what's maintained in the control panel of your digital audio workstation, whichever one you might be using, right? And of course, yours might look a little bit different. You might have slightly different controls, or they might be placed in slightly different places, but generally they keep most of it located up here at the top, and this is what we're configuring. Okay, so we've talked about tempo, we've talked about the bar, the beats, the time signature, important stuff. And let's just make sure we're, before we move on, really clear on how to count again. So if we're looking back in our digital audio workstation, right now we've only are talking about quarter notes. So this, just the single beats, 1, 2, 3, 4. But of course, there's a lot more to it than that. You can go in here. I'm going to go back to my piano roll here, and I'm going to double these. I'm going to take all the notes. Apologies, this is like not the most exciting piece of music here, but I just doubled them. Now notice we still have the same number of bars. It's still taking the same amount of time, but now, of course, we have twice as many notes in the same amount of time. So again, 2 bars I've composed so far. 1 and 2, and these are our lovely 8th notes, and so we count this as 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So that's how you count the eighth notes. You put an and after the number value. Pretty simple, right? Pretty straightforward. Now let's double it up again. And by the way, when I'm saying double, really the correct term is subdividing. Every time we break these up, we're subdividing the notes. We're taking our diagram here, and we're subdividing. That's what this is. So right now this is a single one beat, and we're breaking it up into two half beats, is what it's called, right? So now let's do that again. And take our notes. Let me just zoom in here. I'm going to have so many notes here, I'm going to need to shrink them to fit them all. So let's double that again. So watch what I'm doing now. Look at all them notes. Holy cow. So that's what this looks like. What do you think that is? What comes after 8? So if we go back to our chart, we had a whole, a half, a quarter, an eighth. What's next? 16th. So here's our good old 16th, and notice they have the double lines. So when you see the double lines, you know you're talking about 16th, and you know you're going to be counting pretty darn fast, because again, we have the same 2 bars. See our vertical line? So it's the same amount of time, same tempo, everything's the same, but now you got more notes in this place. And these are counted as 1, E, and A. 1, E, and A. So you'd go 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a lot faster than just the quarter notes. 1, 2. Sorry, I shouldn't say I made a mistake there. Hopefully you caught that. Not faster, just more notes in the same amount of time. So if we were to play this, so I want you to listen to the click in the background, the tick, tock, tick. So let me turn off the piano for a second. Believe it or not, that's a piano. So that's the click. That is the beat. 1, 2, 3. Nice and steady. And then, of course, we throw in 16th notes. So we're fitting in there for every one click, we're fitting 4 notes. That's why you get that crazy sound. But used all the time for ostinatos, for example. Oh yeah, 16th note ostinatos, extremely common. But let me see if I can. Oops, didn't want to do that. So I'm gonna go. Let's just go back for reference. I should have done this before. Let's listen to how it sounds. 8th notes. 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. Right, that makes sense, right? So again, we have the click is representing the beat, right? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. By the way, 120 is a very common tempo. I should have mentioned this earlier. You probably already know this. Very good starting point. I think for our lesson today, it's going a little fast, so I'm gonna drop it down to like 100. Just a little easier to kind of hear what's going on now. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And for references, I'm going to go back and I'm going to take out the first bar. I'm going to take out the eighth notes, so we're just straight up quarter notes. So listen to the quarter notes hitting the beat perfectly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. Awesome. Now let's be a little adventurous here. Let's add another bar. And what do you think I'm going to do this time? I'm going to add 16th notes. So copy these guys and double them up there, right? Subdivide, sorry, that's the correct term. So now we have 1 bar, 2 bar, and 3 bar. One of the things I do not like about it's probably the same in all digital audio workstations in their MIDI environments, but at least I just know Logic. Notice how the size of the bar changes. I mean, I understand you have to do that. You got to fit more, and it's better to read. You need to be able to read it. But the problem is it makes it look like the bars are taking longer when in reality they're not, right? This is the same amount of time to go through these 4 notes as it is to go through these 8th notes, as it is to go through these 16th notes. The time is the same. That's the critical part. It's just you're stuffing more notes in there, right? So let's listen to this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1, 2, 3, 4. Wow, it's giving me a workout. Let's turn it down a little bit. 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a... All right, I'm out of breath. You get the idea, right? Each time we're breaking it down, we're cramming more notes in the same amount of time. One other fun thing to do is triplets. And this is where we're starting to get into more advanced stuff. So right now, everything's very steady. It's divided by 2. You're taking a note, you're breaking it down by 2. What if you took a note and broke it down into 3? That is what a triplet looks like. And I actually need to use the good old MIDI tools here just to make it perfect. So I'm going to go on the second bar, and I'm going to put in another note, but I'm not going to be precise because that's not what a triplet looks like. If we go back there, that is not what I'm looking for. I want it to be evenly spaced. So the distance between this note and the next note there needs to be equal. So you spread it out like this. And just to be sure, I'm going to go in and create a triplet. I'm going to talk more about this in a minute. Now let's look at that. There we go. Triplet. You always know you got a triplet when you see that little 3 over there. That's a good sign. Okay, so let's give the triplet a listen. So essentially this is going to be counted as 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4. So the triplet, there's only one triplet in there, and it's on the first part of the second bar, and it's counted as 1, 2, 3. Sounds like a famous song there. Maybe you've heard of it. If you know the song, leave it in the comments below. So those are triplets. So those are, again, we're just touching the surface here just to get a rough idea of music notation, the note values, tempo, and how to count rhythms. And I'm not, again, worried about the tonal sound of it. Right now, it's just purely how you count these. So when you see this stuff written, when you're working in your digital audio workstation, when you're advancing and progressing and moving on and doing more advanced things with things like quantization, which we're gonna do shortly, when you're layering rhythmic elements, whether it's percussion based or whether it's tonal, actually, you're aware of what you're doing and you're able to count those beats out and know how they're going to sound when they're playing together. All right, so we just had a nice refresher of basic music concepts, right? So what's a bar, what's a beat, what's a time signature, what's the tempo, what are the note values, how you subdivide notes, and just a quick refresher and intro, perhaps, if it's new to you, on those concepts, as well as how to count rhythms. So we're going to now take those concepts and start applying them to our modern music production technology and digital audio workstations. And what I'm going to do now is just a very quick peek on quantization. So that's this idea of using the quantize feature in our DAW to help improve our performances. And believe me, this is just a quick intro. We're going to dive into it more in the next video, but that's why I wanted to do this video here, is to get everybody kind of a good foundation for how to apply these concepts moving forward. So what does it mean to quantize? Just really quick, you'll see perfectly in a second, so I don't want to blab too much, but it's almost like a way of taking your performance, and if it wasn't quite perfect, if you were a little off in certain areas in terms of your beats and hitting the beat in time, quantizing will help bring those notes back onto the beat. So very quick description. That I didn't really do it justice. Let's look at an example to see exactly what it means. I think it'll make more sense. So here is an example of something I recorded that's similar. It's a performance, and let's look at the score for it. This is what's so fascinating here. So look at the score. This is what we just did a minute ago, right? So just simple quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Couldn't be more simpler, right? Music notation, however, can't, as great as it is, it's just there to describe the music, but it's up to the performer to interpret that and perform it, which makes, that's kind of the spirit of what makes music sound so good, right? It's human. It's something a performer performs. Let's go back to how MIDI interprets this, or interpret my performance. So I'm going to zoom in. Hopefully you can see all the lines here. This is, of course, what is called the grid. And the grid takes our beats, so our 1, 2, and it breaks it up. It subdivides it for us. So we get all the different subdivisions within our beats. It's like a zooming in of our performance. And you can see this guy, for example, is not on the grid. It's off. So is this one. And this one looks like it's a little ahead, right? So this one I played a little too soon. This one I played a little too late. But again, let's go back to the score, how it's written. You don't see any of that there, right? Just looks like good old-fashioned music notation. So this is where the whole idea of music being written and music being performed is so important. This is what it's all about. So quantizing will effectively take these off notes and put them back on the line. So let's just do that. I'm going to select this. I'm going to go over to my quantize, and because we're dealing with quarter notes, I'm going to switch it to quarter notes. And look at that. I didn't even have to do anything else there. Now, if we look at our notes, they're all on the grid. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, again, that's for another video. Believe me, we will definitely be talking about that. But right now, we have it all on the grid. And the strength is an important feature because that allows us to maybe dial that down a little. Maybe you don't want it to be perfect. Maybe you're not a robot, so you move the strength down, right? Swing also introduces offsets to that as well. Watch what the swing does, takes it off. And so that's how you start to breathe back more naturalness in it. Maybe if this performance was, again, my original one, that is just too far off, right? I mean, it's going to sound too jerky, for example. But maybe if I turned it up the strength too high, so now I have the strength at 100, well, that's going to sound too robotic, for example. It's just so perfect. No one would ever play that perfectly. So usually what we do is we kind of mix it up. In general, this is a horrible thing to try to say in a general way, but usually somewhere around 80-ish kind of helps. See how that's still quite on the grid, but not perfect. Usually at 80 is a nice starting point, right? You don't want it to be too perfect, but 80 kind of gets you pretty darn close. Similarly, and if you want to add on a little more swing, that'll now swing those notes off the beat a little bit more, right? It's so, you know, swing is basically so it's not so perfect on the beat. It's like playing a little behind the beat. And so that's going to add a little more variation as well. And again, in a future video, we're going to dive into this a lot more. So I don't want to make this video too long. But the other things you can play with that I would call out is something called the humanize feature. I think pretty much all DAWs have this, or some flavor of it. And this is just a quick little tease of what we'll talk about in the next video. But humanize is where you really get in and introduce more randomization to the playing, and you can randomize the pitch, the velocity, the note length, and of course the position. So this is like, let's say you played something pretty good, but you quantized it down, got it a little bit closer to the grid, but it still needs a little more life and a little more humanization, a little more humanity. That's when you go into this interface and you start tweaking that and applying that to your performance. And that adds more of that randomization. But again, that will be for the next video, because I can't make these videos too darn long. But hopefully that was a good tease, and I'm hoping that this video is a good foundation, because we went over, again, the really basic concepts of counting rhythm and note values and meter and tempo, as well as a quick intro into, you know, how to use the quantize feature. And that is where I'll leave you today, because we are going to focus on quantizing in much more depth in the next video. And then the one after that, we're going to dive into more complex rhythms, rhythm layering, polyrhythms. That's where things get really more interesting with the percussion and rhythm in general, as well as controlling tempo and using tempo as a tool in our compositions. So hopefully this video was helpful. And again, I know it was quite basic, but we're trying to set a foundation here. Please like and subscribe, and be sure to come back and see Percussion Part 3. I'll see you next time.